On Monday night, we launched a new website on the show called Canadianjihad.ca. It's a very simple website. It documents in their own words what radical Muslim leaders are preaching in Canadian mosques and even in schools. This seems to be pretty basic journalism in 2015. I mean, every day there's another Muslim terrorist attack somewhere in the world that is an active jihad of Muslim holy war against infidels. An infidel means everyone who isn't Muslim. And these terrorists explain and excuse their jihad by referring to the Muslim holy book, the Quran, and other Muslim texts like the Hadiths. That's why we call it Muslim terrorism instead of just some random crime committed by some random guy who just happens to be Muslim. It's because the terrorists themselves explain their motives, their mission, even their method of terrorism by referring to their Muslim religion and even to the historical actions of Muhammad, Islam's prophet. That's why, for example, the Islamic State's preferred method of murdering their hostages is by cutting their heads off. That's a direct replica of jihadist killings described in the Quran. Burning that poor Jordanian pilot alive is also an echo of how Muhammad dealt with apostates. And of course, the whole purpose of so many of these terrorist groups is to set up an Islamic state, a religious theocracy, a government called a caliphate or khilafah in Arabic. That's why the terrorist group is called Islamic State. That's what they're trying to do, to set one up. And other Muslim terrorist groups like Boko Haram in Nigeria, they say they want to do the same thing, set up a Muslim dictatorship that's ruled by Sharia law, the laws of the Quran. So they say they're doing this as part of their Muslim religion. They point to the Quran as historical and legal and religious authority for it. They are endorsed by Muslim clerics who give fatwas, that's a judicial order approving of their jihad, even approving of particular tactics, like raping captured women. Now, thank God, most of the world's 1 billion Muslims don't believe in this interpretation of Islam. But obviously, a lot do. And we know that over 100 Canadian Muslims have gone overseas to join the Islamic State, like this thug.
This is a message to Canada and all the American Tawagheet. We are coming and we will destroy you, bidnillahi ta'ala. I made hijrah to this land for one reason alone. I left comfort for one reason alone, for Allah Azza wa Jal. And inshallah, after Sham, after Iraq, after Jazeera, we are going for you, Barack Obama. Takbir!
That's a Calgary boy. Why would anyone move from our lovely, peaceful, friendly Canada to that hellhole of Syria and talk about destroying us? Or take this guy who converted to Islam and who now encourages other Canadians to either join him over there in the Islamic State or to start murdering infidels here at home in Canada.
You either pack your bags or you prepare your explosive devices. You either purchase your airline ticket or you sharpen your knife. You either come.
And of course, Muslim terrorists in Canada have done just that. I'm not just talking about the deadly attack on Parliament Hill and the attack right before that in Quebec that killed another Canadian Forces soldier. I'm talking about a dozen or more foiled attacks where, due to good police work or good luck or a bit of both, we have caught terrorists before they had a chance, going all the way back to the Toronto 18 plot. So back to my point, isn't it an obvious question for any journalist to ask, are there extremists in Canadian mosques? I mean, where did the 100 or so John Maguires come from? Who radicalized them? Who organized their trip overseas? Where did they meet others to conspire? I mean, I suppose it's theoretically possible that they were all radicalized by long distance over the internet or whatever. It's possible. But why don't we check? Why don't we look at what's being said in Canada's dozens of mosques? Is that not a very basic thing to do for journalists? And yet, has there ever been a less reported on story? Whenever a Muslim terrorist is accused or convicted in Canada, media are quick to report the abject denials of Canadian Muslim leaders. They never saw the guy at the mosque, or they kicked him out, or they never liked him or supported him, whatever. I mean, sure, report those denials, yeah, but how about, checking? How about going to the mosque on a Friday night to listen to a sermon? And if it's in Arabic, why not find out what it meant? Why not pick up a book from the mosque bookstore? We've actually done a half dozen shows over the years about how common books are instructing young Muslim men on wife beating here in Canada, how it is literally written into popular books for young married couples, how to beat your wife. I mean, we live in a hyper-feminist culture where any perceived sexist slight is national news. I mean, for example, private Facebook comments made by some sexist blowhards at Dalhousie University's dental school were national news for a week because of how misogynist the comments were. The media phrase is rape culture. Okay. But what if that rape culture weren't considered wrong or marginal or dissident and sometimes even illegal? What if those attitudes were positively being prescribed by community leaders and religious leaders? Well, they are. In these books I'm telling you about, I've showed you about, but because the religious and community leaders calling for sexism and even rape are Muslim, the mainstream media refuses to cover it for fear of being called racist or intolerant. That's why 1,400 girls were raped in the small British city of Rotherham, UK. And police and social workers covered it up because they didn't want to deal with the fact that the rapists were Muslim rape gangs, immigrants from Pakistan. It's a spectacle to watch the Canadian media in the wake of Muslim honor killings here in Canada, like Aqsa Parvez or the Shafia quadruple homicide. How hard they try not to use the word Muslim or Islam, how hard they try to deny the rationale used by the men who murder their own daughters. It's a religious rationale. I can only think of one genuine investigation by the mainstream media into what is taught at Canadian mosques, and credit where it's due, the CBC. Well, actually not the English CBC. That they're so cowardly they won't even use the word terrorism on TV. They won't even show the cartoons of Mohammed that were related to the terrorist attacks in Paris. No, I'm talking about the French CBC called RDI. They did this documentary about a Wahhabi mosque in Montreal.
Parcouru avec lui une panoplie de livres achetés à la librairie de la mosquée Assouna. Des recueils édités en français au Liban, contenant des fatwas, des conseils de penseurs islamistes offrant leur propre interprétation du Coran.
Là, par exemple, il est clairement dit que la femme adultère, sa peine, c'est la peine dépend de la personne qui a commis ce péché. Si le coupable est marié, qu'il soit homme ou femme, il est lapidé à mort. Et pour eux, ce sont des lois et des textes qui doivent être appliqués aujourd'hui, que ce soit dans un pays musulman.
Stoning women to death. Why hasn't any other journalist covered that same mosque? It's still there in Montreal. In fact, Justin Trudeau bragged about campaigning at that specific mosque. Why no questions about that? Why hasn't the English language CBC gone there to see if they're still preaching violence and bigotry? Seems like a big scoop just sitting there for any journalist to take, right? Well, the Saudis finance Wahhabi-style mosques all around Canada, including in my own hometown of Calgary. Don't you think some enterprising reporter might just, go and listen one Friday night? I mean, that's what Canadianjihad.ca does. The website and our series of interviews with Jonathan Halevi over the last couple of weeks, we just ask a very basic question. Are they teaching extremism in Canadian mosques? Are they teaching violence? Are they even teaching maybe terrorism? And what's been so surprising to me is how easy it is to find. You actually don't need to know Arabic. You don't actually even need to go to the mosque much of the time. Radical imams in Canada positively boast of their views online. In YouTube videos, on Facebook pages, they are proud of their extremist views. We at The Sun are sometimes mocked by our competitors as not being real journalists or whatever. Well, it's true, we lack the billion-dollar budget that the CBC has, but what about actually doing real reporting? I don't mean just symbolic stuff like showing the cartoons of Mohammed. I mean basic investigating. What about the mosque run by Shaban Sharif Mahdi in Edmonton? Here's what he has to say about the Muslim Brotherhood, an affiliate of the Hamas terrorist group.
لماذا الجماعة الإرهابية؟ لأنها تدعو إلى عودة الخلافة. إذا أنا إخوان، أنا إرهابي، ومن أرادنا والإسلام والمسلمين بسوء فاجعل كيده في نحره وادخله بنفسه واجعل تدبيره تدميرا واهلكه كما أهلكت عادا وثمودا. اللهم انصر المجاهدين في كل مكان وفي كل شبر من أرضك يا رب العالمين.
What do you think the young men in his congregation think of that? Do you think it would encourage them or discourage them from becoming violent jihadists? Well, what about this guy, Saeed Regeya, from the Greater Toronto area? He talks about killing apostates, and he has a very special designation for our infidel prime minister.
If one of us was invited by the prime minister of this country and he says, you know, I'm giving you a special invitation, exclusive invitation, come to my house, have dinner with me, chat with me, sit with me, talk to me, I'll talk to you. I guarantee you every one of you will come out of that meeting raising his head with pride. So proud of himself, so pleased, you know, tweeting every second, oh, I'm sitting with the prime minister. Your life will be nothing but him, and he's the enemy of Islam. He's an enemy of Islam. I guarantee you if we go to him right now, and he's the man who said, you know, the threat of this country is Islamism.
So our prime minister is an enemy of Islam. Do you think that would make a young, impressionable Muslim man more or less likely to commit violence against Canada or its symbols, like the Prime Minister himself, or even someone standing guard at our National War Memorial in a soldier's uniform? Or how about this guy, Mazen Abdul Adim, from London, Ontario, perfect English, born here, but saying he's not loyal to Canada. He wants a caliphate, an Islamic State instead.
So this is the problem, that without a khilafah, Islam cannot be implemented. And we individually are obligated to have a bay'ah to a khalifa. So it's required for us to give a bay'ah to a khalifa, but since there's no khilafah, you can't have a khalifa. Therefore, it's a fard upon us to reestablish the khilafah so we can give a bay'ah to a khalifa. And that's why this is a call, not only to the brothers here, not only brothers who are watching online, everybody who has any capacity of spreading this word all the way to the armies of the Muslims, our brothers and sisters. This word has to reach them. They have to understand that this is the only way forward. It's the only way to achieve the Nasr of Allah Azza wa Jal, is to support this deen and this call for Khilafah.
Khilafah means the caliphate, an Islamic State. Do you think listening to that guy would make a young man in the congregation more or less likely to support a terrorist group called the Islamic State? Or what about this man from Saskatoon, Mohammed Mustafa Mustan, who actually is allowed to give lectures in public schools in the city? He not only hates secular democracy, he has a special condemnation for the enemies of Afghanistan.
And I stand against the injustices happening because of the democracy, because of the capitalism, because of the invasion in our lands, and because of the traitors and the rulers who we have on our lands who are brutal against us and nice to our enemies.
So he's against these enemy invaders of Afghanistan. Well, we were one of the countries with troops there for more than a decade. He says he hates our democracy and he hates the enemies of Afghanistan. What do you think a young, impressionable Muslim man in Saskatoon would think the right thing to do about Canadian or U.S. soldiers is after hearing from him? Now, those are just a few clips. We have so many more. I'm not going to play more. We've shown you a dozen. We've shown you specific calls to kill gays, to kill apostates, that is, people who convert away from Islam. Okay, just one more clip. Here's Saeed Regeya again, saying if you insult Mohammed, you should be put to death under Sharia law, the Sharia law that he is fighting for.
If you're in a Muslim country and you insult Muhammad or Jesus, you will receive the same punishment. If a Christian does that in Saudi or in a Muslim country, he will get in trouble. But if you purposely do this, then it goes back to the ruler. It goes back to the ruler and the judge of that time. But it could also, be to the point as far as killing that person.
Kill that person. We've got so many more clips that we haven't shown you in the last couple of weeks. We could do another 10 shows on this subject. Maybe we will. And we'll put all the key quotes, the video clips, the Facebook comments up in one place at the same website, Canadianjihad.ca, for you, our viewers, to read at your leisure. And for any real journalists at the CBC or elsewhere who want to stop talking about Eve Adams or robocalls or the long-form census just for a moment. Sorry to take you away from those huge, important stories, guys. But just take our work here. Take Jonathan Halevi's research and just steal it. Hey, guys, CBC, Global Mail, whoever, seriously, just steal our work. It's all laid out for you at Canadianjihad.ca. So the next time someone tells you there's no radicalization in Canadian mosques,
responsible of the Prime Minister to throw the mosques into his comments. It was a form of Islamophobia and it was wrong. So he should realize that he was wrong to do that and simply apologize to the Muslim community who want to be partners on these issues.
Yeah, the next time someone says it's racist to say there's extremism in mosques, just tell them visit Canadianjihad.ca. Or not. I mean, when you hear an alarm clock, you can do two things. You can hit the snooze button and go back to your sweet dreams, or you can wake up and do something. I think our media party, when it comes to the Canadian Jihad, they're all about hitting that snooze button, aren't they?